Welcome to Lived Stories, a podcast that holds space for inspirational interactions that are real about navigating the challenging journey of separation and divorce. Expect laughter and some tears. It's all welcomed because Lived Stories is meant to be a safe space. I'm your host, Liv Lewis, and today I am here chatting it up with Lauren LoSchiavo from Divorce Mediation of North Jersey. Lauren, hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you for
And
having me.
of course, it's so good to see you on more positive circumstances. For those of you who are listening, Lauren was actually my mediator when I was going through my separation and divorce. And ooh, girl, that was a time. But you know what? First of all, again, I just appreciate so much you saying yes, but also to your approach. But before we even get started on that, tell me a little bit about what you've been up to. Tell me about the practice, and we'll start from there.
Absolutely. The practice has been busy. I think more and more people are
Mhm,
looking to go through this process with
mhm.
mediation and
Good.
avoid more acrimonious process involving
Mhm.
courts, lawyers. Mediation seems to be gaining in popularity,
Okay.
which is good.
Mhm.
It's of great benefit to people going through a tough emotional process
Yeah.
of making such a difficult decision.
Yeah.
It's such a momentous decision to separate or divorce your partner. A
Mhm.
lot of times there's children,
Yeah.
finances are a concern. So if I can make the mediation process, you know, painless and smooth
Mhm.
for them, um,
Yeah.
I think people really appreciate that.
Mhm.
It saves, of course, a lot of time, a lot of money. We try to keep the process smooth and amicable.
Mhm.
And, I think that really benefits my clients.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my background is as a licensed clinical social worker.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I started in private practice as a therapist in
Mhm.
2008. And then I became a mediator in 2012. And
Mhm.
I thought it was a great adjunct to kind of what I was already doing, which was
Okay.
basically helping people communicate about difficult things.
Yeah.
I felt if I can help people as a therapist communicate about difficult things, that might make me be able to be a successful mediator and help them
Mhm.
communicate in those ways. And so
Mhm.
far, it's worked out really well. So.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So what is mediation at like, you know, what is it?
Right. So mediation is an alternative
Mhm.
to the traditional divorce process of using attorneys and courts.
Okay.
So in mediation, a neutral third party guides the divorcing or separating couple
Okay.
through the process and acts as a neutral third party.
Mhm.
So a mediator could be really anybody. Usually, you might have some kind of a legal background or a counseling
Okay.
background or a master's degree in a related field,
Mhm.
accounting. You don't have to be an attorney to be a mediator. And I'm an accredited mediator, so I've gone
Okay.
through trainings. And I got my accreditation about 7 years ago through the New Jersey Association of Professional Mediation. So you want to make sure that your
Yes.
mediator has the proper certifications or credentials. You want to do your research on their background. But
Mhm.
basically, I help divorcing or separating parties make really important decisions
Mhm.
on their finances, on
Yeah.
plan what their children is going to be. So, as a mediator, you have a lot of responsibility to help people make these momentous decisions that are going to have, major impact on their lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember, and for those of you who are listening and don't know me, I remember the first meeting. Well, first of all, I didn't even, so through another, I think my therapist actually recommended you to me, and I was in such a emotionally droughted place that
Right.
I remember coming into your office and feeling, while it was a challenging time, like it was like a okay, right? And so I remember sitting on your couch, and me and my then my ex-husband, we didn't I don't I didn't even know what I was getting ready to do. Like, I think a lot of people think divorce and it's like one, two, three. There's so much unpacking and unresolved things that you do. So talk me through like your overall approach. Cause I
Right.
remember I was just like so sad, but I was like, okay,
Yeah.
we're here. And I'm looking at you like I was like a deer in headlights. Talk
Yeah.
to me about your process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of times, I will have one of the, the husband or the wife
Hmm.
and the wife, or the wife
Hmm.
reach out to me
Right.
to inquire about starting the mediation process.
Hmm.
And a popular misconception is that, the mediator could be biased towards the person
Hmm.
that initially reached out to make that phone call.
Got you.
The way that if people interview an attorney, the attorney is then not allowed to meet with the other party.
Got it.
That's
Hmm.
not the case in mediation. Mediators maintain their neutrality in the process, no matter who calls. But what
Hmm.
I like to do is once somebody reaches out to me, we set up a free consultation.
Hmm.
And usually that free consultation is done with both parties at the same time
Okay.
so that we can, I can go over what the mediation process is,
Mhm.
what their issues may be, right? We discuss any questions that they may have, any special circumstances in their situation. It's a way for them to see if the mediation process sounds like something that could work for them, if they
Okay.
feel comfortable possibly choosing me as their mediator. And it's also a way for me to sort of vet them a little bit and make sure
Yeah, yeah.
that their situation would be appropriate for mediation, because not everyone situation would really be appropriate for
Mhm.
mediation,
Eh,
so.
so I don't so clearly I can't do this because I don't know if I will ever be neutral. How do you go about staying neutral? Like,
Yeah,
I'm sure I want to go back to I want to go back to what you said about like whether or not this is actually going to work for me, because I think that's important too. But
right.
how do you stay neutral?
Yeah, I mean, we're all human, right? We may have
Right.
our
Hmm.
own thoughts and feelings
Hmm.
about things,
Yeah.
but um, I think non-attorney mediators may be able to stay neutral sometimes a little better than
Mm-hmm.
attorneys mediators
Hmm.
who are used to taking a side and advocating. It's kind of a known thing, in our mediation circles, and
Yeah.
when we go for our conferences, we always talk about, how important it is to stay neutral. Um,
Hmm.
that is the hallmark of what mediation is.
Yeah.
And it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm completely neutral and providing people with the information that they need to make informed decisions, right?
Yeah.
That's where my responsibility comes in. As long as I'm giving you the facts, I'm giving you some guidelines on how divorce or separation works in New Jersey, and you're making decisions, informed decisions, then I've done my job, right? A decision may not make the most sense to me. It may not be what I would choose personally, but
Mhm.
as a mediator, I respect people's individuality in the process and the
Yeah.
uniqueness of the needs of their own families.
Mhm.
And I make sure that they understand that I'm neutral, that I'm not going to speak up if, it seems like something may be a little bit out of unfair to one of them, but we make sure that they both really know what they're agreeing to, that they
Yeah.
fully understand, any ramifications.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the outcomes in mediation are very similar to the outcomes for people that use attorneys in courts. It's just that you're maybe spending $3,000 to $5,000 on the whole process versus $100,000.
Right.
A
Yeah.
much more pleasant, if you could say that about a divorce
Mhm.
process, a much more pleasant, amicable process.
Yeah. That's huge. And I think a lot of people, that is definitely a myth to bust, in the fact, well, first, isn't, you can't get a quick divorce given that you have to unpack some of the things you
Yeah,
have to work through,
right,
the
right,
parties. I
right,
also love that you said that one, you have like a social worker background, so
yeah,
that level of emotional intelligence and some of the tools you use to deconflict some things and not being a lawyer. So for those listening and
right.
thinking about it, like listen to what Lauren is saying. So you mentioned listening when you're having your first consultation, listening for like whether or not mediation is even right. What are some of the signs you look for like, okay, this couple could in fact go through mediation, and what is like the like y'all need lawyers. Like,
Yeah.
talk me through what you're looking
Yes,
for. Yeah.
absolutely. So I would say that about 85% of people that call me are
Mhm.
appropriate for mediation. I would say
Okay.
mediation is appropriate for the majority of people that reach out to me.
Okay.
They're looking to move through the process amicably. They don't want a
Mhm.
lot of drama. They both are, relatively on the same page, although sometimes,
Yeah.
somebody is not on, they're not really feeling ready, and
Mhm.
it's a little more, they're a little more hesitant, and then
Yeah.
we explore that to make sure that everyone is on the same page and everyone is ready to begin the process.
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
it's different than litigation in that only one person has to be consenting, and their attorneys can then serve the other person, and then you have this adversarial approach. In
Yeah.
mediation, both parties have to consent to participate in the process. So as
Mhm.
long as they can sit in the room together, as long as they're
Mhm.
willing to financially disclose to honestly disclose their finances, because we don't do forensic accounting type stuff,
Mhm.
as long
Mhm.
as they're willing to show all of their cards, then,
Ooh.
usually mediation would work well for them. Sometimes people come into mediation and they really have a clear idea of what they want, what they want to do. Maybe they've already made some decisions, and they just really need sort of a scrivener and someone to guide the
Mhm.
process for them, and
Yeah. Yeah.
help to make what they're doing more formalized with an actual memorandum of understanding, which is the
Mhm.
mediation version of a marital settlement agreement.
Yeah.
So, and then other people are looking for the mediator to really guide, the process of helping them to make every single decision. And that,
Mhm.
I would say I have both in equal numbers. Now, people, and they want to save money. They want to
Right.
get this done as soon as possible. Maybe they've been, sitting on this for a long time and they're just kind of ready to move forward in their lives. Like,
Yeah.
they just want to come unstuck and start
Mhm.
the next chapter. They don't want a divorce, to get all jumbled up with, attorneys and the legal system that could drag out for a year or longer.
Yeah.
So mediation can be completed in a matter of weeks to months, just depending on the situation. And it helps preserve the amicability in the process, which is very important, especially if people have children together and they have to
Yeah.
co-parent for
Yeah.
many years following that. So I would say mediation is better for children as a whole.
Mhm.
Just the way it's structured creates a more amicable environment, and there's less people communicating and getting things kind of, a little messy.
Yeah.
Three of us sit in a room together, we go over all issues, everything is very out in the open. And
Mhm.
people, I think, appreciate the straightforwardness of the
Mhm.
process. Now, people that are not appropriate for mediation, yeah, there's
Yeah.
definitely people not appropriate for
Right,
mediation.
right, right.
Right now, if there's child abuse allegations, that would not
Okay.
be appropriate for mediation.
Okay.
Um, if there is domestic violence, that's, often not appropriate for mediation. So
Helpful.
I would
Helpful.
usually suggest that those, situations, attorneys be contacted. Yeah.
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
That's
Or
very
if someone
helpful.
can't sit in a room together, if they can't sit in a
Yeah.
room together. I
Mhm.
mean, we can
Mhm.
handle high conflict, but they have to be willing to sit in a room together.
Yeah.
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 You talk a lot about being unstuck.
Yeah.
What, like, and I remember it's like I'm going back in time and remembering there's moments when you're like, oh, this marriage is just a mess, and you think it's a bump, and then you finally realize, oh, I might need to end this. And then it's like, okay, ending it, what does that mean? And then when you start to kind of go through, like, type up on Google divorcing someone, right? Like, I remember feeling frozen. And so for those who are in that frozen situation, exploring an amicable way, I will say I recommend, if you're able to sit in the room, but there has to be a straight up real talk about, you said this, putting all of your cards on the table. And when you're in this place of, like, separation, I can't stand in whatever. I don't necessarily think you can do that, but I want to also acknowledge that that was a hard thing for me to do, because you now are in self-preservation mode, and that aspect of showing your cards, especially when it comes to the finances. I remember, Lauren, I was like, "Oh, okay." And then talking about that. So talk me through, okay, so, like, what are the things that I need to prep for? I said yes to mediation.
Right.
My partner and I are in the room. What am I preparing for in the showing of the cards? We can talk
Yeah.
finance first. Yeah.
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 So we show all the cards, right? We want to know income going back 3 to 4 years. We ask for proof
Mhm.
of income. You have to bring that proof in. We go over employment history, current employment. So yes, we look at all of the finances when it comes to income. We look at all of the finances when it comes to assets. So bank accounts, investment accounts, 401ks,
Mhm.
pensions. And, it's hard for people. They've worked, their entire lives
Yeah.
for what they've earned. And it's, in addition to the emotional difficulty that is just coming to terms that you're going through a process like
Yeah.
this,
Mhm.
there's also the financial concerns that people have. What is that going to look like going
Mhm.
forward? Yeah, so before anyone, considers, the process, it's always something to think about, to think, what might my financial situation look like going
Ooh,
forward. And sometimes people are surprised because sometimes there's some gender biases, right?
talk about
Yeah,
that. Yes.
yeah,
I'm gonna write that down, because I do
yeah,
explore, because I will say personally, one, you have to know the legal ramifications and the law in your state.
yes,
And I think a lot of people assume, because I'm an ex, because I'm a woman, I deserve, I get,
yeah.
but no, talk about how important it is to know the law in your state.
Yeah, the laws in New Jersey, or other states are pretty
Mhm,
gender neutral,
mhm,
i- it doesn't necessarily matter. It doesn't matter. Are you a woman or man? Are do you identify as whatever gender, something
yeah,
else? Like that doesn't necessarily matter at all. It's
yeah,
what you're bringing to the table financially that matters, right? It's the financial facts that matter. And you see a lot of surprised looks on people's faces.
mhm,
So it's definitely important to do some research before you come into mediation on some of the information and laws in your state, right? People come
mhm,
in sometimes assuming that, I'm a woman, so I should get all of the parenting time, and that's
mhm,
just not the case. Parenting time is gender neutral. Spousal support and child support it's gender neutral. It depends on, the finances and other factors, but gender doesn't come into play.
mhm,
Yeah,
mhm,
and people are very surprised about that sometimes. Yeah.
yeah. And so how do you go about navigating that shock?
Yeah, very gently. Very gently in as neutral way as I can,
Yeah,
just kind of explaining, the facts. And there's sort of also, a bias sometimes that men have on themselves if they're the lower
mm,
earners. They are sometimes afraid to speak up in the mediation process. And I have to, make sure that everybody has the information about what they might be entitled to, what they might need to understand so that they can make decisions for themselves. Um,
that's
yeah,
good, Lauren, because I wouldn't even, I mean, I'm a woman, and this space is for women, but I
yeah,
definitely, that is a blind spot that you just pointed out to me
yeah,
about, even the bias of the male in the relationship, and also to the male earner
Yeah,
in the relationship too.
right, right.
Talk about some of the, as you think about the times and the economy, talk about what you've been seeing as it relates to, based on what you're comfortable with, obviously, women earners and the surprise and the bias there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
what I've been seeing is women out earning their male counterparts. I've been
Mhm,
seeing men, out earning the women. You know, I can't say that there's one gender that I've been seeing that's always the one earning more. It's really
mhm.
very diverse. So that
Wow.
may
Okay.
surprise a lot of people. It's very diverse.
Mhm.
Um, I have just as many high women earners as I do men that are high earners.
Got
Yeah,
it. Got
yeah.
it.
And then women, my women high earners are sometimes surprised that they may be the ones that are obligated to pay some spousal support or child support.
Mhm.
But you still see that men have their own gender biases, and a lot of times they might be afraid to ask for that, or, you know, just feel that it makes them less than to ask for that. So we just have to make sure that everybody knows that they need to
Mhm.
kind of speak up in the
Yeah.
mediation process. Because again, you're not going to have an attorney that's, on your team. You have to be able to speak up for yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What other surprises have you encountered as you continue to coach couples through this process? We talked straight talk, putting everything on the table,
Yeah.
the surprise of like, oh snap, high earner, not, and it's gender neutral. What other things will you say are most surprising when you're coaching couples?
Well, I'm, surprised at how sometimes they think that their situations are so complicated, and then,
Mm,
we're really able to unpack everything pretty easily.
mhm,
Right? I mean,
mhm,
mediation has a very definitive structure, and I have a very kind of linear, structured, efficient way that I do things.
mhm.
So, I would say that the clients experience a little more surprise than I do. They're surprised at the ease of the process. Some
That's fair.
some people wait, 20 to 30 years to get a divorce. I've been doing a lot more gray divorce, so people in their 60s,
Gray divorce, girl,
70s.
that's a whole segment.
Yeah,
Okay, gray divorce.
yeah,
Mhm,
older adults now. They were somewhat separated for years and they're ready to just kind of move forward. And
mhm.
I think that a lot of that sector can be very surprised at how easy the actual mediation process itself was. And maybe they're thinking, wow, I could have done this so much sooner and just moved on with my
Oh,
life. But a
yeah.
lot of people put it off. There's a lot of misconceptions that divorce has to be this ugly, expensive, long drawn out process. And in mediation, that's not the case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Wow, great divorce. I just learned something. So we talked finances. Let's talk about the kids and the pets, because the pets are a thing now.
Yeah.
What what are you sharing, or what are you seeing as you talk to your clients about that process?
Okay, so about the kids and the pets, I see that for some people, it's their pets are their children, right?
Yes.
I did a mediation a few years ago where we got through everything really quickly. Everything
Mhm.
went so smoothly, and then when we got to the pets, it was a little more precarious, and
Dicey. Yes.
it was a
Okay.
little dicey, but we
Mhm,
figured it out.
mhm.
Their pets were, the most important issue to them more than
Got it.
anything else.
Mhm, mhm.
And I think people choose mediation because they want an amicable process for
Mhm.
co-parenting their children. They don't want to
Yeah.
leave um, hating each other. They want to
Yeah.
leave, being able to work together, right?
Mhm.
Because sometimes you're gonna have to work with the other parent even until the children are into their mid-20s, right?
Yeah, that's a
With
reality.
college and things like
That's a
that.
reality. Yeah.
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 So I think that most people want to put their children first in the process, and also they're choosing mediation to save money, so that they can give more of their, money to their children, to their families, and not to the court process, not to attorneys. I think that people are really becoming much more savvy about how they spend their time and their money.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I want to commend you in my experience because I think one, I knew my North Star and I knew I wanted an amicable separation and I
Right.
knew my boundaries. And one of them was I don't want it to get into a fight, especially because I had really young kids at the time. Can you believe they're teenagers now? Anyway, so it's very important for my listeners to understand your North Star in the process. I also, the reality is, and Lauren can't say this, like there's going to be decisions that you make that feel uncomfortable for you because it's like, ah, really? But you have to think about what's best for your children because your children are also a part of the separation. And while it's hard that you're making these choices, but at the end of the day, people talk about, "Oh, I stayed for the kids." No, you're separating perhaps for the kids, and they also need to see a healthy separation so they understand, I would say, how to resolve conflict in a way that doesn't become contentious.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think parents are the role models for their children, right? And in my therapy practice, um, I talk to all different kinds of people about their experiences in their lives and what it was like for them growing up with their parents. And what I've witnessed to be the most damaging is people that have grown up in very high conflict households where they might say, oh, my parents like should have gotten separated or they should have gotten divorced. That seems to be, more scarring than
Wow.
when parents realize that, their relationship is not working out and it's best for the family if this happens.
Yeah.
And people are usually, if their parents handled their situation appropriately and were able to remain respectful with one another, they usually do fine as adults. And
Mhm.
that's a good role model for them to,
Yeah.
to know that, maybe they shouldn't stay in a toxic relationship. And it's a good communication role model for how to resolve a conflict or, how to move forward if something just isn't working well.
On our space, I talk a lot about a holistic approach to mental and emotional well-being. I'm going to tap your non-mediator brain or practice.
Okay.
What would that look like? Because you talk, there's nuances of emotional intelligence that go into separation based on
Yeah.
what on your other practice, and feel free to talk about that as well, and the importance of just holistic care for people who are going through separation. That's huge.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's going through a separation or divorce can be one of the most stressful life experiences that anybody goes through, right? Nobody gets married, knowing that that's going to happen to them. There's so many unforeseen life circumstances that can come up, right?
Mhm.
So I always recommend that people have additional support when they're going through something like this, whether they're contemplating if they should go through the process, during the process, after the process. There's divorce coaches that could help them decide, what kind of divorce process might be best for them. It's always recommended that somebody reach out to a counselor for mental health support. That's really important. Doing self-care is very important, and just acknowledging what a difficult time it is in one's life, right? And that it's normal to feel, stressed or worried about things. Yeah. So reaching out to family and friends for support, and anybody's spiritual support is important. If there's a religion that somebody follows, it's great to have that support as well. The only support I wouldn't say is asking friends for divorce advice. Because
Well, talk about
sometimes,
that. Yeah.
yeah, because I have to correct a lot of misconceptions for people sometimes when they call. Uh, yeah,
Mhm.
so emotional support, I think, is where to go with
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Wow. I am so thrilled that we're having this conversation because I think there's so much misconception about the process, about people. I love that you talked about getting advice from friends because I realized, at least in my experience, that I had to add some guardrails and boundaries about what I was sharing
Mhm.
because I also had to manage there's my reaction, and then I had to also realize my friend's reaction and what they believed was
Yeah.
right for me to do. And I struggled with that for a very long time until I realized like I have to protect myself and what I'm sharing outwardly. So I'm so glad you brought that up because it was definitely a hard thing for me to realize, almost like too late, and then having to kind of work through that. What
Yeah.
would you say to a client or person who is trying to figure out separation divorce? They're having a really tough time, almost kind of like a balancing sheet of sorts. What are signs or signals that's like, you know what, you may need to enter this process? You talked about, of course, the domestic abuse. You talked
Yeah.
about, like child abuse, but are there kind of other things, I would say symptoms, if I was a doctor, that you've experienced in your journey in coaching and in your clients that you call out?
Right. I mean, sometimes people are really struggling emotionally to decide what they should do. And I think it's something that is very unique to each individual. And what may makes one person, choose to go through the process could be very different for somebody else. I think if you're experiencing long-term unhappiness, if you're experiencing long-term struggles with communication or trust issues that are ongoing, um, then you may want to consider, if this is a relationship that's going to work long term, or if you would be, better off going through the process. It's so unique to everybody. It's hard to
Yeah.
say specifically what would qualify someone to leave their marriage or their relationship. But it's something that people can definitely explore in counseling or,
Mhm.
with supportive friends or family members. But like you said, when you share, when you're confused about what you should do, and then you share some of that with other people, it can become a little more confusing sometimes because you're trying to balance what you feel is best for you versus, what your friends might feel is best. But there's really no set rules as far as what would make somebody appropriate where they should go through this process and get a divorce or separation. I would say, with an exception of, domestic violence
Yeah. Yeah.
and child abuse. Like, I
Yeah.
think those are definite, deal breakers when it comes to staying with somebody. And I don't want to say that people should go for counseling before they consider, because I really think that's also a very personal choice.
That's true.
And you
Yeah.
don't always know the nuances that people are dealing with. I
Mhm.
think it's just such a personal thing. But overall, I would say if you've been unhappy for a long time and nothing's changing and you feel like you've tried different things, then it may be something to consider. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You said it struck so a chord with my heart when you said it's such a personal thing because in my process, I felt so lonely about some of the things that I had to like get to and get through that unless you've kind of gone through the process, you don't even know what you don't know. And that's one of the reasons why I created Lived and this podcast so that people don't feel alone in the process. And it's also so nuanced. Not
Right.
one story is the same.
Right.
Um, I was kind of thinking through what other things I could potentially ask you, and I wanted to go back to the child support and the child custody and unpack that a little bit. What are some of the things that a person needs to think about when they're going into the process? Custody, what's legal custody? What's physical custody? How
Right.
do you figure that out?
Right. So most of the clients that I have are very
Mhm.
appropriate for mediation, or else they wouldn't be my clients.
Right.
And so we start with the assumption that both parents are fit to have
Love that.
parenting time with their children.
Mhm.
If there's any question of that, then I usually refer them out. Um,
Yeah.
so legal custody is joint decision making on all major issues related to the children. So that would include mental health care, medical care, schooling,
Mhm.
emergency, actions. If there's an emergency, what's the plan? Making sure that both parents have access to any providers that are working with their children, to the schools that their children are attending, that they're each getting the same amount of information, and that they would consult each other before any major decisions are made.
Gotcha.
So when we talk about physical custody, it's really parenting time that we're
Got
talking about. So if one of the parents has 2 or more overnights a week, that's usually considered joint custody.
Okay.
Um, but it's really parenting time that we focus on, what the schedule is going to be, um, how many overnights, you know. And I
Got
see a lot of parents that are very involved with, wanting to participate in parenting their children. Equal parenting time schedules are very popular. So yes, I've been pleased to see that a lot in my practice.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great. And then when is a child considered emancipated? When is the legal custody, does it ever go away? Or is this like a forever?
Yeah. So usually when children reach the age of 19,
Mhm.
child support would stop by order of the law in New Jersey. It
Okay,
goes to different ages in different states.
got it.
We
Very
believe in New
helpful.
York, it goes to 21, but in New Jersey, it can be extended through age 23 if
Oh,
the
wow.
child is attending college.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, so once, it's a little nebulous what is actually considered emancipation, when it comes to divorce and mediation. But I would say that, if you're going by when the child support stops, that might be considered emancipation. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, okay. Is there anything else you think my listeners need to know about the process, misconceptions that I didn't ask you? I went through the process. I think
Yeah.
I learned so
Yeah.
much even talking to you just now.
Right, right. So I think we covered some of them,
Yeah.
but another one is that people may not realize that New Jersey is a no-fault state.
Oh,
So
yes.
you don't have to prove that one of the marital partners did something terrible in order to get a divorce or get a separation. So usually in mediation, the grounds for divorce is commonly irreconcilable differences.
Okay.
If you're trying to prove another grounds, then you would have to go to court to prove that usually.
Mm,
So mediation, it's really, New Jersey's no fault. So it doesn't, so the reason for the divorce does not really influence the decisions that are being made. And sometimes that's surprising to people. They feel like they were wronged in the relationship,
mm,
and that because of that, they feel that they should be entitled to some things that maybe they're just not really understanding well, because New Jersey is a no fault state. So it's good to do your homework on things like that. So I think we did touch on some other very big misconceptions of,
mhm.
some gender biases with regards to who would be the obligor for child support or
Right.
alimony.
Yeah.
And another popular misconception about, mothers being the ones to get the primary custody of the children is a major misconception. Another one would be um, people sometimes don't realize that it doesn't really matter if your name's on the account or if his name is on the account. It's if it was an asset that was obtained during the marriage or it was a debt that was obtained during the marriage, then it's usually considered a marital asset or debt. So it doesn't really matter.
Lauren, you hit on that. Yes. Talk about that a little bit more because I think
Yeah,
that's huge.
yeah,
It's under my name. No, it's mine.
right.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah,
knowing okay, I'll pull this question because I want to get to like how when you say research, like where am I going? How am I finding this information?
yeah,
So, but keep going on all the other things that you were going to list
yeah.
out around the things you see in the misconceptions, because this is
Yeah,
good.
I mean, another misconception is that, divorce destroys children. We kind of touched on that before.
Yeah,
That,
yeah.
high conflict and very toxic households, really hurt children the most.
Yes.
Um, um, Another misconception is that divorce has to be this long, expensive, drawn out process. And, the mediation process really is not done that way. It's very efficient. It's amicable. You're getting a thorough process. You're not missing out on anything by going through mediation that you're
Right.
going to get by going through attorneys.
Right.
It's just there's no real drawback to mediation, but the only drawback is that, if there was domestic violence, child abuse, probably not the best, process for people dealing with that. A lot of people don't realize that New Jersey has a legal separation called divorce from bed and board. So for people that are a little bit on the fence, they're not sure really if they want to fully move forward with a full divorce. Legal separation is another option. So some people have serious health concerns, and it's very
Mhm.
important for them to remain on their partner's health insurance. So divorce from bed and board would allow that. It allows for dividing assets and debts. It allows for equitable distribution. You still remain legally married, but it can get filed with the courts and can be withdrawn if people decide that they wish to stay together. Whereas a full divorce, you would have to get remarried. So that's a very common question that I get when people call a lot.
Wow. I
Yeah.
did not know that.
Yeah.
So you said equitable distribution. What is
Yeah.
that?
So equitable distribution is a fair distribution of assets and debts. So it doesn't mean that
Mm,
everything is exactly split equally down the
okay.
middle, that you split each thing down the middle.
Hmm.
It just means that the overall picture is that each person is going to walk away with the same amount of assets overall, the same dollar amount in their column of asset and the same debt amount in their column. So equitable kind of, it's it's making sure that things are fair,
Hmm.
kind of equal, but not exactly where you split every single thing down the middle, because that would be a lot of work.
Yeah.
So another misconception is that people would have to liquidate all of their financial accounts like pensions or 401ks, brokerage accounts. You don't have to liquidate them. There's ways to transfer those funds tax-free as part of the divorce process.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of information.
But helpful. But I mean, especially if you're in New Jersey, I mean,
Yeah.
call Lauren. She's gonna set you straight. But I wanted to go back to it doesn't matter if something is in your name or not.
Yes.
That is huge,
Yes. Yes.
huge. And it's between the time you marriage license date to,
Yeah.
well, TBD. If you
Yeah.
amass that thing, no
Yeah.
matter if it's in your name or your spouse's name, it's up for air quote grabs.
Right. Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So just for people that, may have just contemplating getting married, or,
Mhm.
you know, it's always good to be proactive, right? To try to understand your finances, to really make sure that there's good financial communication in your relationship, in your marriage, so that you don't run into surprises down the road.
Well, you just made me think of something, and I don't know if you have a POV on this, but prenup thoughts
Yeah.
around that? Isn't there, I think there's something else, it's not post-nup, but like what
Yeah.
are some of to avoid, again, we're not saying you're getting married and then prep for divorce, but in an effort to avoid surprises, prenup or no?
I think it's a good idea. It can't hurt. I actually do prenups as well in mediation. So I've
Oh,
done some
there you go.
prenups. Yep,
Mhm,
yep.
mhm.
I
You
think
do the
it's
prenups before the mediation?
sometimes it's in, so we do prenups in mediation as well as divorce agreement.
Okay.
So that is, people can use a mediator to do a prenup or a postnup. So prenup is before you get married, right? So
Yeah,
you sit
yeah.
down with an attorney or a mediator, and you go over, what happens in the event that this marriage does not work out. And that makes it a lot clearer for how to proceed.
Yeah.
If if that's needed. And then a post-nup people can do, and I've done those as well. That's for after you're actually legally married. And then you say, hey, you know what? I think that it would be a good idea that we put this in place. Yeah.
I mean, not to be a fly in the room, the post-nup sounds juicy. What are some misconceptions about that to unpack?
That it means that there's a problem in the relationship, that it means it's inevitable that things aren't going to work out. I think people are hesitant to kind of leave that bubble of, oh, everything's going to always be great, and not everybody wants to look at the what if, things don't turn out the way that we anticipated. Doing any kind of preparation work, I don't think it's ever a bad thing, but it's a personal decision.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I definitely would feel away if you come up to me,
Yeah.
you want to post-nup. I'm like, what's wrong?
Right. Right.
Well, Lauren, is there anything else I need to know? I feel like I thought I was just talking about this one thing, but I just learned so much. So thank you. But
My
anything
pleasure.
else to cover? I definitely want you to shout out your practice, your website, any socials before we conclude our time.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Facebook. I have a page, Divorce Mediation of North Jersey. Again, my name is Lauren LoSchiavo. You can find me my website by Googling Divorce Mediation of North Jersey. And I think if they mention your
Live stories. So,
live
if you
story,
mention live stories, Lauren is going to surprise you with a special discount.
yeah,
Because again, we're trying to protect and have a healthy separation and divorce and for it to not be contentious.
exactly.
And all her information will be linked to the episode so you can easily get to it without trying to, do too much research.
Yes. And also, I offer a free consultation. So if you have questions about what the mediation process is about, don't hesitate to call. I'm happy to explain how the process works.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Wow. Well, thank you so much for your time. So valuable. And with that, if anything you guys have heard resonated with you, like, subscribe, share. And until next time, cheers to living, my friends. Have a good one. Thank you for listening. We want to express our heartfelt gratitude to our incredible community. Your strength and resilience shine brightly. And together, we're creating a safe space filled with solace, guidance, and inspiration. If you resonated with today's episode, share it with anyone who might find comfort and support this conversation. Let's spread warmth and encouragement and hope. Join the Lived community on social channels. It's Lived Stories on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok, where you can connect with like-minded women, share your story, and access even more trusted resources. Until next time, take care and remember, you're not alone in this journey. You are stronger than you think, and you can do hard things.